Okay, so get this. 5th century, right? Roman Empire. It's like crumbling all around, total chaos.
Yeah.
And in the middle of all that, a whole new way of life is popping up, monasticism.
Yeah, wild time.
People are ditching like everything, their possessions, their old lives to join these communities, all about simplicity, faith,
A radical departure.
big time. And today, we're diving into this letter from St. Eucherius. He was a bishop back then. And it really makes you think about leadership differently.
Oh, absolutely. This letter, it's not even to the monks. He's writing about them, praising how they're living. And that's what makes it so interesting.
Right, because usually you think leadership, it's all about power, right? Calling the shots.
Exactly. But Eucherius, he flips it. He's blown away by these monks, their humility, their obedience. Not exactly what you picture when you think leader, right?
Not even close. And the language he uses, so vivid. He calls them lamps in a world of darkness. Even says they display the life of angels while still on earth. Whoa.
Right. Powerful imagery. You got to remember, back then, Rome, it was all about ambition, luxury, worldly power, the whole 9 yards. So these monks, they're rejecting all that. They'd be like, boom, sticking out.
Like a sore thumb.
Totally, but like a good sore thumb, a beacon of something different. I think Eucherius was captivated by that contrast.
It's got to make you wonder, right? Like, people back then, seeing these monks, they must have been like, wait a minute, they've found something we haven't. There's something special about this way of life.
It's like when you meet someone now and they just have this different energy, a peace about them, a sense of purpose, makes you question things a little.
For sure. It was powerful stuff. But, okay, so humility, we got to dig into that more. Because Eucherius, he doesn't just see it as a nice quality, right? It's the source of the monk's strength.
Not weakness, no. The exact opposite in his view.
I'm listening. How's he connecting those dots? Humility and strength.
Well, one passage he says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, humility has nothing from which to fall. What do you make of that?
It's like, by letting go of your ego of needing to be important, you actually become unshakable.
Right.
Because you're not clinging to the things the world tells you to cling to.
Exactly. You're not attached to those things anymore. You're grounded in something deeper, more permanent, like a tree with deep roots, he'd say.
The humble person weathers any storm.
Because their foundation is strong. They're not easily swayed.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But what about obedience then? Because Eucherius, he spends a lot of time on that too. And it's not just blindly following orders, is it?
No, not at all. He's talking about aligning your will with something higher. God, in this case. Surrendering your ego, but not necessarily to another person, to something bigger than yourself.
Okay, but there's got to be more to it. What makes his take on obedience so different?
It's this. He praises both sides, see? The one giving the command and the one obeying, like it's a two-way street.
Wow.
Not about one person being above the other, more like shared commitment. They're both in on this higher purpose thing.
Okay, that is different. So it's not about like bossing people around.
Nope. It's about inspiring them to want to follow, because they get it. They're bought in.
They see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And to really drive this home, Eucherius, he brings in the ultimate example, Christ himself.
Whoa. Okay. Things are getting real now.
Yeah.
We went from humility to obedience. Now we're talking about Christ.
Right. He reminds us Christ who's equal to God the Father. Right. But he still chose to obey. And not just like a little bit. He obeyed all the way, as the letter says, unto death, even death on the cross.
Heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying even with all that power, Christ chose what? Humility, giving up control.
Basically, it's like the opposite of how Rome saw power back then. They thought you grabbed it, held on tight.
Right. Dominate.
Exactly. But here you have Christ who could have dominated everyone. But instead, total surrender, driven by love, by this massive, bigger than himself purpose.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you put it like that.
Right. And for those early Christians, that example would have been huge EE. Rome's falling apart. Everything's in chaos. They're looking for something new to believe in, a different way to lead.
Makes you think, though, even now, what is it, 1,500 years later or something, we're still wrestling with this stuff. Power, leadership, what it means to have a meaningful life.
It's timeless, isn't it?
Totally. Okay, so let's bring it all home. Humility, obedience, Christ as the model. What's Eucherius getting at? If someone's listening to this right now, especially if they're like in charge of something, what's the takeaway?
He's saying true leadership. It's not about being the boss. It's about service, about inspiring others because you're humble. You're committed to something bigger than just you.
So different from how we usually think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like nowadays, it's all crush it, be number one, Look out for yourself.
Yeah, and that's tempting. But think about the leaders you actually respect, the ones who inspire you. Aren't they the ones who lead quietly? With humility, not ego.
It's true. The best bosses I've ever had. Never had to shout about how great they were. Actions spoke louder.
Exactly. They treat people well. They're always learning themselves. That's humility in action.
So what you're saying is, Eucherius, back in the 5th century, he was on to something.
Big time. He'd say real leadership. It's not about promoting yourself. It's bigger than that. It's about inspiring people to reach for something beyond just their own little corner of the world.
To connect with something bigger.
Right.
Wow, I love that we can get this kind of leadership advice from a letter about monks,
Yeah.
from all those centuries ago.
It's wild, right? These old texts, they still have so much to say.
They really do. It makes you think. Like, what if we did embrace these ideas more? Not just in how we lead, but how we live, period. What would that even look like? It really makes you think, right? Like, somewhere along the way, we got sold this idea that to be a leader is to, like, be a shark or
Yeah.
something. You claw your way to the top, step on whoever you have to.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? And our culture, it just keeps selling us that same story. But Eucherius, with this whole humility and obedience thing, he's offering like a whole different story, almost the opposite, really.
Totally. So
Okay.
instead of clinging to power, you're saying he'd tell us to, what?
Yeah.
Give it up. Focus on something bigger.
Exactly. That's the paradox, right? Letting go of that need to be in control, to be the best, that's actually when you can tap into something much stronger, a different kind of power, the power that comes from, wanting to help others.
Instead of just helping yourself.
Right. And think about it. The leaders who actually make a difference, the ones who inspire people, they usually have that mix of like confidence, but also humility. They don't need to be loud about how great they are.
It's true. Their actions speak for themselves. It's kind of like you were saying before, how Eucherius was so impressed by the monks because they were living differently. Their actions were speaking louder than words.
100%. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's say, just as like a thought experiment, what if we all tried this out a little, even a tiny bit? Like imagine a workplace where the people in charge, they actually cared more about their team than about getting a promotion.
Right. What if it wasn't a competition? It's a great question. What would that even look like? Because at the end of the day, that's Eucherius's challenge to us, isn't it? He's making us rethink the whole thing, what really matters. He'd say it's not about having power over others, but about aligning yourself with something way bigger than that.
Something bigger than your own ego, your own ambitions.
Exactly. And that's where real fulfillment comes from, he'd say, both in your own life and in how you lead other people.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected. We're not just in competition with each other all the time. What a powerful note to end on.
It really is. And if this one little letter from all the way back in the 5th century can make us think about all this, well, maybe it can inspire us too, to lead a little kinder, a little more humbly, and just be a little more aware of how our choices impact everyone around us.
Love that. So to everyone listening, next time you see someone in a leadership role, pay attention. Are they walking the walk like you said, or is it all talk? And more importantly, what about us? How can we each try to live this out a little bit more, no matter what our title is?
Such a good question to sit with, because real leadership, it comes down to how you live your life, not just the job you have.
And on that note, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive. To everyone listening, keep those questions coming, keep exploring these ideas, and until next time, happy digging.